Hey, I'm Eric Bach and welcome. Today we're going to cover 3 exercises to build your hamstrings. Now, the hamstrings are often an afterthought when it comes to physique development. A lot of people will focus directly on the quads and of course the glutes, but the hamstrings are often left by the wayside. This creates a number of issues, both in terms of building an aesthetic, balanced physique, but often in terms of performance. So when we can build up your hamstrings, do so appropriately with the right exercise selection and the right set and rep schemes, then your physique and your performance in the gym is going to take on a whole new level. Now, one thing we want to consider with the hamstrings is they are primarily fast twitch, which is one reason you see sprinters have such incredible hamstring development. We'll talk a little bit about sprinting later on, but it's not one of the top exercises I would generally recommend, at least from the muscular development perspective, even if you often see it, primarily due to a risk reward with the average person who's going to the gym. Now, like any other muscle group, what we want to do is we want to have a combination of high mechanical tension and metabolic stress, aka the pump. When we have this combination, we are setting forth the ability to first build strength, which can directly build muscle in beginners, and then indirectly via increased work capacity, improve muscle fiber recruitment, help other people build muscle as they get more advanced. There's no reason to ever get weaker in the gym. I mean, injuries, but that's a different story altogether. By and large, if we can continue pushing, continue getting stronger, or at least prevent ourselves from getting weaker, that is going to help us look, feel, and perform our best. Now, I typically don't do a workout that's just for hamstrings, but if we want to take a few exercises that bias directly towards the hamstrings, here's how we want to set it up. First, we want to start with a heavy compound exercise. More or less, we want to hit something in a rep scheme of 5 to 8 reps if we're talking about mechanical tension and building as much muscle as we can. And while conventional deadlifts are a lot of fun, I just did them 5 minutes ago, which is why I'm kind of out of breath, they are not the best exercise when it comes to building muscle. And the reason that conventional deadlifts aren't great for building a ton of muscle is no muscle is under a full stretch through that range of motion. It's a great exercise for getting strong, building power, all of these different things, and it's something I incorporate frequently with myself and with my clients. But if we're talking primarily about adding muscle onto your hamstrings, a much better option is something like a barbell Romanian deadlift. With a barbell Romanian deadlift, we're actually getting the hamstrings under a full stretch with a significant load. When you have that combination, we are able to create a ton of overall mechanical tension directly on the hamstrings. Now, a couple cues as you see me setting up for this deadlift. First, when we're setting up for the deadlift, ideally I like to start in a power rack if you have an arm where you can elevate the weight just a little bit. Most injuries or issues that happen primarily in a deadlift happen when somebody's pulling off the ground. However, if you're pulling off the ground to get into place directly for that Romanian deadlift, that's completely fine too. Just make sure your lower back is that your spine is braced and you're holding that neutral spine as much as you can when lifting that weight directly off the floor. Now, one of the issues that people run into when it comes to deadlifts and Romanian deadlifts is getting too much knee flexion. A lot of people still like the idea of lifting with your legs. We're not trying to lift up furniture here. We are trying to maximize muscle stimulation, particularly on the hamstrings. And so what we want to do, if you see me right here, is we want to have a very slight bend in your knees. And all the movement with an RDL comes through pushing your hips back, arms are hanging straight down right over midfoot, and maximizing that stretch directly through the hamstrings. Again, we want heavy load and taking that through a full range of motion. That is going to be the sweet spot for muscle growth, especially on a Romanian deadlift. So barely unhook your knees, then focus all the range of motion on pushing your hips back as far as possible. Now, as I'm going through these reps, it's really important to notice that I'm maintaining that neutral spine position all the way through. If you get to a point where you're reaching down to try to get the bar to the ground or even further, for example, if your feet were elevated, then that's when people run into issues. We never want to sacrifice spinal position for more range of motion. Instead, we want to be able to push the hips back and get the range of motion that we can control without losing bar position where it's drifting in front of us or losing spinal position. At that point, risk outweighs the reward of the exercise. Now, full disclosure, before filming this video, I hit 405 for a set of 8, so my body is a little bit fatigued going through this, but I got 315 on the bar right now for Romanian deadlifts. A lot of times I'll be 315 to 365 depending on my set and rep scheme, so I'm still pushing these pretty hard. A lot of people don't push Romanian deadlifts hard because they think they have to do them for high reps as an ancillary exercise. No, hamstrings are primarily fast twitch. We want to be able to train them hard and heavy, but of course, technique and form have to go first. So in this case, I'm going to use a belt. Again, I've got a little bit of cumulative fatigue. You don't always have to. I only use a belt typically when I'm kind of north of 315. That's a sweet spot for me. And I'm going to use some straps. Primarily reason, I'm trying to train my hamstrings. I do not want my grip to be a limiting factor in my ability to train my hamstrings, right? Because if my grip is giving out, is that a weak point? It is. There are different ways that we can train it and improve it, but if it's preventing muscle stimulation from the thing that we're trying to focus on primarily, then it's not serving us. I'm gonna use straps. It's also gonna help me be able to focus directly on my technique all the way through the exercise without worrying about, am I losing grip position, so on and so forth. Also, I'm not a big fan of using a mixed grip position, primarily because a lot of people will lift the bar with a slight bend and will actually rotate directly through their spine, creating more issues in terms of technique and potentially back pain. All right, so just for instructional purposes, typically what I would do is I would probably hit 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps, somewhere in that rep range, and I wanna be close to failure. Right here, we're at about 315, and I'm gonna pick this guy up from the ground and just give you guys a good technique example here. So, air into my stomach, slight knee bend. All right, brace the spine. Okay, slight bend in the knees. All the movement here comes from pushing my hips back. All right, catch my breath just a little bit, but just a quick example, 5 reps, could have squeezed out 8 fairly easily on that. But as a reference point, again, we have to be able to take these exercises to the point where we're a couple reps within muscular failure if we want to be able to maximize the muscle building process. Romanian deadlifts need to be a staple if you want to build hamstrings, especially meaty ones. Exercise number 2 is a supported single leg RDL. Now, single leg exercises are great because they help us train around muscular imbalances. For example, if we primarily focus on heavy bilateral exercise like barbell, dumbbell, Romanian deadlifts, for example, we tend to build some muscular imbalances in place. We shift a little bit of weight here, a little bit of weight there, and pretty soon we have an imbalance that can lead to an injury or uneven muscular development. So when we add those single leg exercises in, we can train around those imbalances while also training some stabilizing muscles and support musculature that is often not stimulated to the maximum ability. So with a single leg supported Romanian deadlift, we're gonna go on the same side. I'm gonna have a kettlebell on the same side as my working leg, and working that single leg RDL movement. This is also going to train hips, groin, adductors, abductors, some stabilization, but because I'm actually gonna be supported, I'm gonna hold on to the edge of this leg curl, leg extension machine. It's gonna provide some additional support. Now, if I was doing this exercise just to build better balance and purely for athletic performance, I would probably do it unsupported without having that additional thing for balance, right? But because the goal here is muscle growth, we want to create more inherent stability. When we have more stability, we can create more force and tension within the muscle, which leads to a better muscle building response. These little details are the fine nuances that a lot of people don't understand that make the difference between looking your best, performing your best, and being able to optimize for any one of these things. It's not that there's not carryover, it's just that what is optimal for one thing isn't always optimal for the next. That's a level of detail we like to go into with our coaching with our clients. So not only can they get incredible results, but they learn the what and the why and the how so they can keep great results for themselves long term. Now, when I'm doing this exercise, I'm gonna take the rep scheme up a little bit, 8 to 10 reps. Of course, load can play a role, so if you get to a point where you can't really handle the weight, that's gonna be a little bit different. But again, this is gonna be a good carryover between a lot of mechanical tension and metabolic stress directly within the muscle itself. All right, so same side, abs braced, and I pick the weight up always. Most injuries happen when people are not paying attention to how they're picking weights up. So a little support, slight knee bend. All the range of motion comes from hip hinging backward. You don't need to hit the ground. I just happen to have pretty good flexibility. Even my lats are getting fired up here. Now, one additional cue, I always like to keep the non-working leg bent at 90 degrees. And think of keeping your dick, your crotch, to the floor when you're doing the exercise to keep neutral hips. For example, if I open my hips up and rotate out, then my balance will be negatively impaired. My ability to generate force isn't going to be the same, and I'm opening up the door for injury. And with that knee bent, that keeps the lever arm a little bit tighter so we can maintain good range of motion and do things the right way. Hit the other side. Again, all the range of motion comes from the hip hinge. There's no reaching going on here. My lats are tight. This is also a great anti-rotation exercise and anti-lateral flexion, meaning it's gonna build a ton of core stability and smash your obliques. Okay, so the last two exercises, we had one that's a primary hip extension movement bilateral. The second one is a primary hip extension movement unilateral with a little support to train around any muscular imbalances. This third exercise is going to include more knee flexion, which is also crucial when it comes to developing your hamstrings. If you think about most hamstring curl machines, obviously there's a big knee flexion component because your knee is, well, flexing. This nasty little exercise is called a gliding leg curl. Really deceptive. I've got rings. You can use it with your hands on a Smith machine, in a squat rack, as long as you have something to hold on to, and then your feet elevated on a bench. And so what we're gonna do here, we're gonna have a ton of eccentric control, controlling the tempo here and creating a ton of contraction strength directly in those hamstrings. Now with this, we're gonna go a little bit higher reps. Again, now we're talking like 10 to 12, a little bit of a mechanical tension component, more of a metabolic stress, AKA the pump component tied directly in to really start to finish off those hamstrings a little bit further. Something to hold on to. We use a crushing grip, meaning just hold on hard. Feet elevated, and now hips up, abs tight, spine neutral. Now I'm gonna drive my heels into the bench actively. There's tension in my hamstrings right now. I'm gonna pull my body in, contraction, in 3 to 4 seconds on that eccentric. Literally 2 reps in, and my hammies are getting lit like I used to get in college. All right, that's exercise number 3, the gliding leg curl. I'll typically hit 2, 3, sometimes even 4 sets, depending on my workout volume, to really smash the hamstrings. Figured I would give you one more. We're gonna have a straight leg bridge. On a typical bridge, on a typical single leg hip thrust type exercise, that knee angle at about 90 degrees, and that's gonna create a great contraction in the glute. If we wanna bias it towards the hamstring, we simply extend that working leg out a little bit further, and voila, we have a ton of tension directly on the hamstring. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna elevate my feet on the bench, just like I did on that gliding leg curl, because it's gonna increase the range of motion at the very beginning. Then, because we're gonna be holding this contracted position, so a single leg contracted position isometric, we're gonna put a ton of tension directly in the hamstrings. Here, I like to do a 30 to 45 second hold. This can be done, you can do 1 or 2 sets actually in part of a warm up or as part of rehabilitation from a hamstring strain, or you can do this as a finisher at the end of your training. Again, it's gonna depend what exactly your goals are and how you wanna apply it. So non-working leg is bent. Now we're up. And now I'm actively driving my working leg into that bench and holding. All right, gang, so there you have it. 4 great exercises if you want to be able to build meaty hamstrings. If you got value from this video, please do me a favor, drop me a comment below. Let me know what muscle groups you want me to hit next. And of course, hit subscribe. That is how we can keep all this great content coming for you. And if you're interested in personalized coaching so you can look great naked without living in the gym, all you got to do, head to the description box below, go to bachperformance.com/coaching. And we will take care of you from there. Till the next one. Did you find this helpful? If so, pound that like button and hit subscribe. Now, if you want a free copy of our Chiseled Muscle Cheat Sheet, the no BS way to help you lose body fat and build lean muscle in 90 days, make sure that you go to the description below and download your free copy. Any questions? Drop them in the comments, and can't wait to see you with the next video.